But I've been incredibly fortunate. I feel I get much too much credit with respect to the reality of the situation. I have an amazing team on the ground that keeps me safe and makes it possible for me to work and to actually derive a huge amount of enjoyment from the days that I spend in Virunga, from the days that I spend with this amazing team of rangers. And I think it's apt just to say a few words about that. There's Norbert Mshenzi, who's my deputy, and who's been enormous support right from the beginning in 2001. He's been working in Virunga since 1968. So it's from him that I derive these years of experience and of accumulated knowledge about the park that are so important to our work. There's Innocent Mburanomwe, whose father was a ranger, his grandfather was a ranger, his brother was a ranger. He was killed 5 years ago. His brother was killed 5 years ago. Innocent personifies the Virunga's rangers, somebody who was born, who grew up, and who lives in the tradition that is so unique to Congo and so unique to Virunga, a very deep passion for wildlife conservation. Rodrigue Katembo, who manages the central sector of the park, in many ways the hardest area to manage. It's where we've lost the most rangers. He had a very different background. He was born in South Kivu, and he became a child soldier at the age of 11. He was trained in Rwanda, and he fought the first Congolese civil war, the AFDL war. He walked from Goma to Kinshasa and back again, so close to 5,000 kilometers through the forest. When he returned, he was reunited with his mother, who forbade him from staying in the army, and he joined the National Park Service and is one of the great figures of authority, of leadership that we have, and a very key figure in our ability to resist in Virunga. And then Atama Matrandele, who I spoke about earlier, the young ranger who joined me from Garamba, where we used to work, somebody I'd known for 20 years, we'd worked together, who joined the National Park Service as a teacher and then became a ranger. He was so good that he moved up through the ranks and became a sector warden for the northern sector where the Rwenzori's are. And he was so good that he eventually was transferred from Virunga to become a park warden. 6 weeks ago, he was killed in Upemba National Park. And so we lose one of the truly great conservationists in Congo. He was murdered by Mai Mai militias on his way back to the station because of the work that he was doing, protecting the park and protecting the population from them. So that's for the leadership, but of course there's the rangers, and I'm very fond of this moment. It was by the side of the road in Goma, just next to Mugunga IDP camp, where about 500,000 internally displaced people were moved in 2008. And in that great mass of people that were fleeing the war in Rutshuru and Masisi were our rangers and our families. I had only been warden for a few weeks then. I was very inexperienced, and I was out of my depth. And so we summoned all the rangers and we discussed the situation. And it was they who explained to me their feeling about the situation and the feeling about the way forward. And that formed the approach that we've used ever since, our whole approach to the park, our whole approach to conservation, which is very simple. They've committed their lives to the park. They've worked there for a whole lifetime. They've put their lives on the line for that park. And in many ways it's succeeded. The gorilla population has increased. There are no species that have gone extinct in Virunga National Park since independence. And it takes years and years and years to build up that kind of asset, but it can take 3 days to destroy the park. And so it's absolutely imperative that we never leave the park, whatever the situation. And so we have to find ways, we have to adapt fast to ensure that the rangers will always stay on the ground, whatever the situation. And it was they who explained that imperative in very simple language, and yet the idea is so innovative for conservation. And from that, we developed an approach. What do you have to do? And in fact, that approach is new for conservationists, but it's the same approach that humanitarians would use in a conflict situation, which is to do the work that you're trained and expected to do. If there's a war and there are people in need, humanitarians need to be there to provide that support. But that requires diplomacy, it requires negotiation. And so our first step was to travel. We went to Kinshasa and we explained that, and it was incredibly well received by the highest levels in government. And thanks to that, we received our first authorization to talk to the militias, to talk to the rebels. And we were the only government security agency that were given the green light to do that, because it was understood in Congo that even when the political situation at the moment, when there's civil war, conservation, just like humanitarian work, has to override that. The work has to continue. And so we were able to contact the CNDP movement at the time that had overrun the park and establish a regular dialogue with General Nkunda at the time. And this was accepted by Kinshasa, and it provided the basis for the work that we were going to do from then on. But of course, it wasn't just negotiating with these militias. We also had an enormous number of internal problems within the communities that our rangers came from. And so there was a reconciliation that had to happen amongst the rangers as well. I'm not going to go into the long history of interethnic conflict in the Kivus, but you know, within our small team of some 300 rangers, we had people from all communities, and they had to work together. They had to get along in spite of all those tensions and conflicts. And that's something we've had to work on very hard to ensure that we remain a national authority, a conservation authority, and not a reflection of all the problems in the Kivus.